about that. Yep. There we go. All right. So the recording just started because, of course, I forgot about that. Anyways, welcome everyone. I am so excited today to have Lori Barkus on for a discussion again today. Lori is a family attorney. She's licensed in Florida and Colorado. Those are the only two states you can work. Okay, you're licensed. Okay, just double checking on that. So today, well, Lori has been with us before talking about different parts of divorce. Today, I am so excited because we're going to talk about mediation. I know nothing about mediation, never used it. I know a little bit, right? So Lori is going to be here to tell us all of the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts of mediation. So Lori, welcome. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit more and then a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, that would be great.
Absolutely, Robin. It's always a pleasure to be here, but I'm so excited about today. I am Lori Barkus. My company is Sustainable Family Solutions. We are a South Florida and Colorado-based family law firm whose primary purpose and passion is helping women divorce successfully. And today we're going to talk more about mediation, something everybody's talking about and nobody really seems to understand. And that's okay. The legal system is very confusing. None of these statements are meant as judgment. It's just very concerning to me because I see a lot of information that's not necessarily accurate. And I think it leads people unintentionally down a bad road. So my goal is to help people not make a lot of the mistakes that I see that are more expensive when you try to fix them on the back end. So I really enjoy talking about things and explaining them. And one quick disclaimer, none of this is legal advice. We may get to questions. We may get questions in the chat. People may want to ask questions. We cannot tell you about your specific situation. We're not allowed. It's against our rules. It's against our licensing laws. It's not good for you because this is live and it's not confidential. And we really don't know enough to give you the information. So it's not that we're being mean, but we don't want to steer you down the wrong path. So this is more general than specific.
Wonderful. Yeah, and that's absolutely true because I get some questions, from messages and things, and I'm not a lawyer. I can check this out, check with this, check with your lawyer, check with your county laws, your state laws, right? Or the county website, but I am not a lawyer. Do not take it as legal advice. And again, Lori, we're not under contract. Lori is not under contract. So no specific legal advice. All right, now Lori, I have a question about mediation. So, so we file the paperwork, right? However that's done, you do it yourself, you do it through a lawyer, whatever, and then you just kind of stop. Some people just stop and they say, well, I'm just going to go to mediation. We're going to have a mediator figure all of this out for me. Good or bad?
I have to give you the answer that it depends, which everybody knew was coming. But here's the thing. Everybody goes to mediation as part of a case. If you file a case at some point, if you don't settle it amongst yourselves, whether you have lawyers or not, a judge is going to send you to mediation. You don't see a judge before mediation. We will talk about that a little bit more. It's very important to be prepared for that mediation. But here's what comes up a lot. People will give this advice that to other people getting divorced and say, don't spend money on lawyers. Lawyers are expensive. They're just going to fight. You're not going to get anywhere. Hire a mediator. Hire a mediator. I know somebody who did it. I did it. It was a lot cheaper. It was wonderful. And mediation can be wonderful, but the right people have to go into it and have to be prepared. I was a certified mediator for about 15 years in Florida, mediated hundreds of cases, possibly even thousands. I really didn't keep track. It was one of the best parts of my practice to work with couples who weren't represented by attorneys when it was the right fit. And let's talk about that. First of all, you have to understand the situation. Do you know the numbers? Do you know the financial picture? You need to go in getting that. The mediator does not represent you. The mediator is not going to get that information for you. And I can't emphasize this enough. There are no magic pills. There's no magic solution, especially not in divorce and not in mediation. You don't just walk into a mediator's office and everything gets figured out. It does not work that way. So if you go in there unprepared, it will not be successful. You need to know your financial information. And you either need to consult with an attorney, which I always highly recommend, or you talk to a financial professional. Make sure you understand it. Maybe you're not a finance person. I totally get it. A lot of people hate numbers, but you have to understand it. I can't tell you the number of times as a mediator, I would have a party who's like, well, I don't know what my needs are. I don't know what I should get. Kimberly, that is a great question. Kimberly's asking if you go to mediation after discovery. Yes. If you filed a case, you will go to mediation after you exchange financial information. So that's why if you're in a situation where you haven't gone to court, you and your spouse are like, okay, we're not going to go to court. We're not going to file. We're going to sit down and work this out. You want to make sure you have that information. You may not need the formal discovery, but you need to know that you have the information. I'm sorry, Robin.
No, that's great. Right, because you need to know what it takes for you to live on. What is your income? Do you work? Does the soon-to-be ex-spouse work? What is the income? What is the family home? Do you have a mortgage? Do you not? What does it take for groceries? What does it take if you don't want to keep? Here's what I'm going to say, right? Don't keep the family home. Just sell it. Seriously. You have that home, right? We'll go into that another time. But you have to know what it costs. What is your health insurance? What are your groceries? What is your gas? What is your car? What is insurance, right? And that's so that when you go in there as, looking over your numbers, you're not having the soon-to-be spouse say, oh, that's okay, you can live on $2,000 a month.
Yep, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
Right? And what happens, Lori?
Yeah. And what happens, first of all, a couple things. As a mediator can't give you advice and shouldn't be giving advice. So if you think you're going to go in there and the mediator is going to decide what's fair or figure it out for you, that's not going to happen. Again, no judgment, but understand what you're getting into. That's not how mediation works. And you need to know that. You need to understand that. I've had mediations where both parties are very positioned on what's fair. And well, I'm being fair. And I know what the law would say, but I can't tell you. And that's a terrible position. Believe me, that makes people upset, and I get it. And if I say it once, I say it 50 times before I mediate a case that I'm not giving legal advice, but I'm not sure that people understand what that means. When it comes to, hey, am I entitled to alimony or maintenance, or what that number should be, what this should look like? Is this asset marital? Is this not marital? Those aren't questions a mediator in most states can answer and likely should not answer. So again, you need to have that information. And that's why there is a discovery process. But I understand, again, I'm a big fan of mediation. There's people that it can work for. Don't oversimplify it. Maybe you need to talk to somebody like Robin, who can help you identify everything, help you figure out what your assets are and what your expenses are, and help you figure out that financial picture. And that can be invaluable. Kimberly, I see your comment. Yes, it can take different amounts of time, and it either maybe one person really understands it, or maybe they really haven't been complete about it. Because as a mediator, I've gone over financial statements. I can't really give the advice, but I can say, do you have everything, or all the bank accounts here, all the credit cards here? But I can't guarantee that. So that's a big part of it. And on the kids side, it's great to come up with an agreement. It's great when people get along. Again, I love mediation. I mean, some of my most rewarding work was mediation. But one thing we would really dive into in mediation is a complete agreement. I understand that you're flexible. I understand that the kids are going to see mom and dad whenever they want. And I hope you always do that. I think it's a wonderful thing. But you've got to get details, and you're going to get along a lot better if you have a clear understanding of, like, just to pick a random example, back to school expenses, field trips, especially sports and field trips are getting way costly for kids these days. Not always covered. Who's going to do it? What's it going to be? Do we really agree on these things? Can we really split the expenses of clothing and things like that, especially as people are moving more towards equal time with their kids, which means there really isn't a lot of child support being paid. Are we accounting for those? Because if you don't, I guarantee you, in a lot of situations, the person getting the child support is going to go to the other person and say, what about the back to school? And that person's going to say, I pay child support, and think that their $150 a month is paying for everything. And not to knock that. I mean, if that's the number, but it obviously doesn't go very far.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say that we have a couple that are, I'm going to say that they can kind of talk back and forth and they're getting kind of okay, but there's a few points, and not anything with the kids, right? Because that is another, we have to have a discussion on that one. But it's like, as a mediator, how do you come into play? Do you say, well, they're getting this much in retirement or money, what about this? Or what can you say?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question.
Okay.
There's a few things I can say. First of all, I can help you communicate with each other. And I can help. One of the things you're really doing is passing offers between each other. Well, I think I should have $5,000 a month in alimony. Well, I think you should only have $2,000. And I can facilitate that conversation around those numbers, because sometimes that gets emotional, and we can talk about what's really being said under the emotion that sometimes comes up. I can also review things and say, well, let's look at a sworn financial statement. Let's look at numbers. I can't say which number is fair. And the other thing I can't do, because I know this comes up a lot, we're a high conflict society these days, I can't change people. Remember, again, this is not the magic pill. If your spouse is the narcissist that's their way or the highway, they're not going to listen, they're not going to get along, I don't have the remedy for that. I can work with that. I've got a lot of high conflict training. But if that person is, and I see this sometimes, people will call and they'll say, I've been a stay-at-home for so many years, and my spouse says, don't talk to a lawyer, just go to mediation. It'll be fair. Robin's shaking her head. She knows where I'm going. Yeah, it's just, here's the thing. If somebody really wants to be fair with you, they want you to understand it. And they're comfortable having those discussions. So always be aware of that in a mediation situation. And I mean, when I would walk in a room, I could see the power dynamics right away. I mean, I once had somebody sit in my chair at the head of the table. I was like, oh, interesting. So, and you've got somebody who's kind of almost like shrinking back in their seat when the other person's talking. Can you stay in those conversations? Because if not, you're not your own advocate, and maybe this isn't the right place for you.
So is this, everyone's in one room, right? It's the spouses, right? And you're all in one room. What if one spouse really says, I cannot be in that same room with that person? Is there a way to mediate and to have one not in that room?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can break into what's called a caucus, so that both people are in different rooms. I've done that quite a bit in my mediations without attorneys. When you go to mediation with your attorneys, or if there's a court case, generally you are in different rooms. I could probably count on one hand the number of times we're all in the same room, because if you have attorneys and you've gone through all that, and if you could settle it sitting in the room, you would have done that. You probably wouldn't have gone to mediation. So you probably will be separate, but you still, and sometimes when you're separate, it's easier to talk to the mediator because you can say things in confidence, but at the same time, the mediator can't solve it. I mean, you could talk about what's concerning you and how you feel around that person. And yes, as the mediator, I can go back and forth and I can go in that room and face your spouse. But at the end of the day, you still have to be part of your own negotiation.
What if, and I would presume this has happened to you, because we hear a lot of the stories that one of the spouses is hiding money, hiding some financials, could be in cash, could be property that the other spouse knows it's there, but doesn't know how to, I'll say, find the deed or find the statements. How do you deal with that in mediation?
Well, it's a challenge because chances are if that person's hiding it, they're not going to admit it. And again, mediator is not a forensic accountant. Mediator is not an investigator, not a judge, not an arbitrator, not somebody that can say, I find that you're lying. You're not doing that. You are a complete neutral. So if somebody says, I know there's more money, you've got to do some investigating. That you probably have to file something with the court, because once you file, then you have access to certain remedies that you don't have on your own, because it's a little bit more than a private investigator to find money, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, so in general, if you suspect that, don't even go to mediation right away, I think is what I'm hearing. It's like you need to either try and find that stuff yourself, get an investigator, get a financial investigator, something, somewhere, somehow. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, because again, you're not going to be able to resolve it, because it goes back to our first point. You don't have enough information. And
Sure.
and I've seen that where one person and the negotiation doesn't go well because the one person thinks that whatever that number is, it's huge. And no matter what the other person offers, you're not going to trust it, and you shouldn't. Because, and I actually had a mediation where that happened right in front of me. And no matter what the one party would offer, the other one would turn it down and say, well, you must have more. So again, you can't prove these things. And there's clearly not a lot of trust if you feel somebody's hiding money from you.
Yeah. Kimberly mentioned credit cards. So here's another one, right? One of the spouses opened up a bunch of credit. Now, here's a good one. When does that debt become just one spouse and not the other? Is it the day they file? And then what happens in mediation? And it's like, oh my God, there's $50,000 of credit card debt I didn't know anything about.
Mm-hmm. It depends on the state when that separation happens, and it also depends on what the debt was for. So yeah, it really hard to answer. One thing I would say about credit cards is you can find debt that's attached to your name by running your credit report generally. And I generally recommend that to people so that you know, but your spouse comes in and says, okay, there's $50,000 in debt and I know nothing about it. And you know nothing about it. I mean, the first thing you need the statements that show, okay, what is this? What is it for? Because sometimes you have people who are just spending a lot and one person is just not aware of that. And it's like, well, that's how that bathroom remodel happened. That's how I paid this off. That's how we had that nice vacation. And the person who's in shock, just didn't know, wasn't keeping track, or it might be something that maybe you shouldn't have to pay for.
Yeah, I like that. Right?
Sorry to hear that, really. Yeah, it does happen. And I mean, credit cards and, and using them and when to use them, that's a great conversation to have with Robin. It really is, because I've seen that. I think we've all, there's a temptation of putting things on cards and then kind of being
thinking that it's all going to get split. They're going to have to pay for it. And that's not necessarily true. Yeah. And really, you should know that because of the discovery beforehand and because of before the mediation, right? Again, know your financials, plan your divorce, get all the information that you need. Okay. What else can you tell us about media? Oh, how long does it take? Any idea on the cost? I mean, is that different per state, per attorney? How about some stats on that?
It would vary. A lot of mediators, I believe, use a flat rate for divorce. I used to do that. I had a package that included so many sessions, so much time. It was very laid out in terms of what it was. If it required more time, then that would be billed at an hourly. For a lot of people who understood their finances, who had so rather modest estates, just a lot of us out there were working, we've got W-2s, that kind of thing. It would work out very, very well. The time component depends upon the availability. And again, the way I would do it is we would talk about all of this at our first meeting, and I would give the parties their financial statements, say, okay, here's your homework. You have to have these done before our next meeting. Let's talk about what we need to exchange. Do we need to appraise a house? What information do you guys know what's in your bank accounts? Yes or no? Do you know what bank accounts there are? And so we would talk about what information was needed and what would be gathered, keeping in mind, I can only go with what I see. I'm not auditing. I'm not looking at it saying, I'm not looking at credit card statements to figure out is something irregular or there transfers out of a bank, any of that. Again, I'm the mediator. Don't have that role. Can't do it. So just looking at that and then asking the parties based on their schedules and my schedule, when can we meet again? And then it depends on how many sessions we need to have. So, I mean, that's kind of the practice. It would normally take, I mean, it could be done in 4 to 6 weeks, start to finish. And some mediators will prepare the paperwork for you. But again, that kind of goes into a couple things we may not want to cut, depending on your situation. Before you go to mediation, you may want to talk to a lawyer, talk to a financial professional, make sure you fully understand. So you know whether you can get alimony or have to pay alimony, or what child support would look like, things like that. And before you sign an agreement, you absolutely should have it reviewed. I can't tell you the number of calls I get from people who say, I have this agreement and it's just not fair, or it's just not complete, and I don't know what to do about this. And now I have to go back to court and do it, when it could have been done in a more simple way. And some mediators are more detailed than others. Some people just don't want to do it. I mean, I would have a lot of people that just zoned out, and it's like, no, we really got to talk about this. And I mean, I can't force you to, but you really, really should get all those details in, because something's going to come back. And I know that emotional feeling of, I just want this to be over, but especially if you have kids, you have young kids, you've got to make sure that you're complete and you understand what's going to happen. And all those expenses from extracurriculars to college, and how you're going to decide things in the future, things like that. So it helps to have an attorney look it over and say, we might be missing something, or this may not be clear. I mean, the number of cases I've gone to court over because something in an agreement is just not clear.
So again, here's what I want to say. Never ever sign an agreement at a mediation meeting. Never, right? I mean, take time. It's such an emotional time for everyone. It's like, take the time, tell them you will not sign anything. You'll get back to them in 7 to 14 days. This is your life that we're talking about. This is the life, your kid's life. Everything may depend on this. Have an attorney look it over, or maybe even a friend, right? And they can't give you legal advice, right? And again, or, a financial professional like myself. I can look it over. I cannot give you legal advice, but I can say, you may want to take another look at this,
right,
or talk to an attorney about this, right? And again, I cannot give you advice. You have to do it yourself. But like Lori was saying, don't sign that agreement. You sign that agreement and it gets filed with that court, and you want to come back in another month or two and saying, oh my God, I can't live on this. This is not right. This is not whatever it is.
And that happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, the money that you're going to then spend, right? It's the attorney and the time and the emotions. All of this adds up, right? So don't sign anything.
And this goes for if you don't have lawyers. This is what's called a pro se mediation. If you're in mediation with your lawyer, hopefully you like your lawyer, you trust your lawyer, you guys get to a good agreement, which you should have discussed before. So it's not a huge surprise. You can sign that. You can sign then and there. I mean, I would listen to your lawyer in that situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right. If you're working with your lawyer, please listen to them. If you don't feel comfortable, and again, it's very, very emotional, even you can tell your lawyer, you know what, let me think about this for a week. It's okay, right? Because you need to feel good and understand what's going on with your life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kimberly, any other questions? And I'm going to check on Facebook to see if there's any other questions. We're coming up to the half an hour mark. So, and I don't want to keep people too much longer. I do not see questions. Kimberly just says some great advice. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. And Lori, thank you again. We're going to have to do this again and schedule another one.
Look forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that and find a subject that we want to talk about. Thank you all for showing up for the replay and or in live. And remember, every Tuesday we do have a live. Utilize the group, ask questions. We got a bunch of experts in here that we can get help. Anything else, Lori?
No, just it's always a pleasure, Robin. And anybody that's listening to this now or recorded, we really wish you the best of luck. Mediation can be wonderful. It can be a great way to close this chapter. Just make sure you're prepared and that you protect yourself.
Yep, absolutely. Listen to Lori, find out your information. Don't let anyone tell you what's fair and to sign without you understanding everything. And Lori and I can't say that enough.
Right.
We can't. We've seen too much heartache later on, and it's just not worth it. So again, thank you, Lori, for showing up today and having this discussion. Thank you, Kimberly, for being here, and we'll see you all next week.
See you later. Thank you.